How are you doing today? Happy Sunday. I am going to take this nap time of my girls, to read the rest of Stone Fox to you guys. There's 3 chapters left, so this is going to be kind of a long video. If you don't want to listen to it all at one time, please pause it and come back to it later. Okay, I'll also upload it to Google Classroom. But I just have to give you a little bit of a warning. I have probably read this story 7 times since I became a teacher, and it never fails that my eyeballs begin to leak at some point. Hopefully it doesn't happen today. Maybe I've gotten stronger over the years and can handle it, but we'll see. We're gonna start with the day. Here we go. The day of the race had arrived. Little Willie got up early. He couldn't see out of his right eye. It was swollen shut. Remember, Stone Fox hit him in the face. As he fed Grandfather his oatmeal, he tried to hide his eye with his hand or by turning away, but he was sure Grandfather saw it just the same. After adding more wood to the fire, Little Willie kissed Grandfather, hitched up Searchlight, and started off for town. At the edge of their property, he stood at the sled for a moment and looked back at the farmhouse. The roof was covered with freshly fallen snow. A trail of smoke escaped from the stone chimney. The jagged peaks of the Teton Mountains shot up in the background toward the clear blue sky overhead. "Yes, sir," he remembered Grandfather saying. "There are some things in this world worth dying for." Little Willie loved this country. He loved to hike and to fish and to camp out by a lake, but he did not like to hunt. He loved animals too much to be a hunter. He had killed a bird once with a slingshot, but that had been when he was only 6 years old, and that had been enough. In fact, to this day, he still remembered the spot where the poor thing was buried. Lost in his thoughts, Little Willie got to town before he knew it. As he turned onto Main Street, he brought the sled to an abrupt halt. He couldn't believe what he saw. Main Street was jam-packed with people lined up on both sides of the street. There were people on rooftops and people hanging out of windows. Little Willie hadn't expected such a big turnout. They must have all come to see Stone Fox. Searchlight pulled the sled down Main Street past the crowd. Little Willie saw Mrs. Williams, his teacher, Mr. Foster from the bank, and Hank from the post office. And there were Doc Smith and Mayor Smiley and Dusty. The city slickers were there, and even Clifford Snyder, the taxman, was there. Everybody. Lester came out of the crowd and walked alongside with Little Willie for a while. It was one of the few times Little Willie had ever seen Lester without his white apron. "You can do it, Willie. You can beat him," Lester kept saying over and over. They had a race for the youngsters first, and the crowd cheered and rooted for their favorites. It was a short race, just down to the end of Main Street and back. Little Willie didn't see who won, because it didn't matter. And then it was time. The old church clock showed a few minutes before 10 as the contestants positioned themselves directly beneath the long banner that stretched across the street. They stood 9 abreast, Stone Fox in the middle, Little Willie right next to him. Little Willie had read all about the other contestants in the newspaper. They were all well-known mountain men with good racing records and excellent dog teams. But even so, all bets were on Stone Fox. The odds were as high as 100 to 1 that he'd win. Not 1 cent had been bet on Little Willie and Searchlight. "What happened to Little Willie's eye?" Doc Smith asked Lester. "Bumped it this morning when he got up. He told me, just nervous. Got a right to be." Lester was chewing on his hand, his eyes glued to Stone Fox. "Big Indian," he whispered to himself. Although Little Willie's eye was black, puffy, and swollen shut, he felt like a winner. He was smiling. Searchlight knew the route as well as he did, so it really didn't matter if he could see it all. They were going to win today, and that was final. Both of them knew it. Stone Fox looked bigger than ever, standing next to Little Willie. In fact, the top of Little Willie's head was dead even with Stone Fox's waist. "Morning, Mr. Stone Fox," Little Willie said, looking practically straight up. "Sure is a nice day for a race." Stone Fox must have heard Little Willie, but he did not look at him. His face was frozen like ice, and his eyes seemed to lack that sparkle Little Willie remembered seeing before. The crowd became silent as Mayor Smiley stepped out onto the street. Miss Williams clenched her hands together until her knuckles turned white. Lester's mouth hung open, his lips wet. Mr. Foster began chewing his cigar. Hank stared without blinking. Doc held up her head proudly. Dusty took a powerful swig of water from a bottle, and Clifford Snyder removed a gold watch from his vest pocket and checked the time. Tension filled the air. Little Willie's throat became dry. His hands started to sweat. He could feel his heart thumping. Mayor Smiley raised a pistol into the sky and fired. The race had begun. Now we're at the race. Searchlight sprang forward with such force that Little Willie couldn't hang on. If it weren't for a lucky grab, he would have fallen off the sled for sure. In what seemed like only seconds, Little Willie and Searchlight had traveled down Main Street, turned onto North Road, and were gone, far, far ahead of the others. They were winning, at least for the moment. Stone Fox started off dead last. He went so slowly down Main Street that everyone was sure something must be wrong. Swish! Little Willie's sled flew by the schoolhouse on the outskirts of town and then by the old deserted barn. Swish, swish, swish! Other racers followed in hot pursuit. Go, Searchlight, go! Little Willie sang out. The cold wind pressed against his face, causing his good eye to shut almost completely. The snow was well packed. It was going to be a fast race today, the fastest they had ever run. The road was full of dangerous twists and turns, but Little Willie did not have to slow down as the other racers did. With only one dog and a small sled, he was able to take the sharp turns at full speed without risk of sliding off the road or losing control. Therefore, with each turn, Little Willie pulled farther and farther ahead. Swish! The sled rounded a corner, sending snow flying. Little Willie was smiling. This was fun. About 3 miles out of town, the road made a half circle around a frozen lake. Instead of following the turn, Little Willie took a shortcut right across the frozen lake. It was tricky going, but Searchlight had done it many times before. Little Willie had asked Mayor Smiley if he was permitted to go across the lake, not wanting to be disqualified. As long as you leave town heading north and you come back on South Road, the mayor had said, anything goes. None of the other racers attempted to cross the lake, not even Stone Fox. The risk of falling through the ice was just too great. Little Willie's lead increased. Stone Fox was still running in last place, but he was picking up speed. At the end of 5 miles, Little Willie was so far in front that he couldn't see anybody behind him when he looked back. He knew, however, that the return 5 miles, going back into town, would not be this easy. The trail along South Road was practically straight and very smooth, and Stone Fox was sure to close the gap, but by how much? Little Willie didn't know. Doc Smith's house flew by on the right. The tall trees surrounding her cabin seemed like a solid wall. Grandfather's farm was coming up next. When Searchlight saw the farmhouse, she started to pick up speed. No, girl, Little Willie yelled. Not yet! As they approached the farmhouse, Little Willie thought he saw someone in Grandfather's bedroom window. It was difficult to see with only one good eye. The someone was a man with a full beard. It couldn't be, but it was. It was Grandfather. Grandfather was sitting up in bed and he was looking out the window. Little Willie was so excited he couldn't think straight. He started to stop the sled, but Grandfather indicated no, waving him on. Of course, Little Willie said to himself, I must finish the race. I haven't won yet. Go, Searchlight, Little Willie shrieked. Go, girl. Grandfather was better. Tears of joy rolled down Little Willie's smiling face. Everything was going to be all right. And then Stone Fox made his move. One by one, he began to pass the other racers. He went from last place to 8th, then from 8th to 7th, 7th to 6th, 6th to 5th. He passed the others as if they were standing still. He went from 5th to 4th, then from 3rd, then to 2nd, until only Little Willie remained. But Little Willie still had a good lead. In fact, it was not until the last 2 miles of the race that Stone Fox got his first glimpse of Little Willie since the race had begun. The 5 Samoyeds looked magnificent as they moved effortlessly across the snow. Stone Fox was gaining, and he was gaining fast, and Little Willie wasn't aware of it. Look back, Little Willie, look back! But Little Willie didn't look back. He was too busy thinking about Grandfather. He could hear him laughing, playing his harmonica. Finally, Little Willie glanced back over his shoulder. He couldn't believe what he saw. Stone Fox was nearly on top of him. This made Little Willie mad at himself. Why hadn't he looked back more often? What was he doing? He hadn't won yet. Well, no time to think of that now. He had a race to win. Go, Searchlight, go, girl! But Stone Fox kept gaining, silently, steadily. Go, Searchlight, go! The lead Samoyed passed Little Willie and pulled up even with Searchlight. Then it was a nose ahead, but that was all. Searchlight moved forward, inching her nose ahead. Then the Samoyed regained the lead. Then Searchlight. When you enter the town of Jackson on South Road, the first buildings come into view about half a mile away. Whether Searchlight took those buildings to be Grandfather's farmhouse again, no one can be sure. But it was at this time that she poured on the steam. Little Willie's sled seemed to lift up off the ground and fly. Stonefox was left behind, but not far behind. Last chapter, guys. Take a deep breath. The finish line. Here we go. The crowd cheered madly when they saw Little Willie come into view at the far end of Main Street, and even more madly when they saw that Stonefox was right on his tail. Go, Searchlight, go! Searchlight forged ahead, but Stonefox was gaining. Go, Searchlight, go! Little Willie cried out. Searchlight gave it everything she had. She was 100 feet from the finish line when her heart burst. She died instantly. There was no suffering. The sled and Little Willie tumbled over her, slid along the snow for a while, then came to a stop about 10 feet from the finish line. It had started to snow. White snowflakes landed on Searchlight's dark fur as she lay motionless on the ground. The crowd became deathly silent. Lester's eyes looked to the ground. Miss Williams had her hands over her mouth. Mr. Foster's cigar lay on the snow. Doc Smith started to run out to Little Willie, but stopped. Mayor Smiley looked shocked and helpless, and so did Hank and Dusty and all the city slickers, and so did Clifford Snyder, the tax man. Stonefox brought his sled to a stop alongside Little Willie. He stood tall in the icy wind and looked down at the young challenger and at the dog that lay limp in his arms. Is she dead, Mr. Stonefox? Is she dead? Little Willie asked, looking up at Stonefox with one good eye. Stonefox knelt down and put one massive hand on Searchlight's chest. He felt no heartbeat. He looked at Little Willie, and the boy understood. Little Willie squeezed Searchlight with all his might. You did real good, girl, real good. I'm really proud of you. You rest now, just rest. Little Willie began to brush the snow off Searchlight's back. Stonefox stood up slowly. No one spoke, no one moved. All eyes were on the Indian, the one they called Stonefox, the one who had never lost a race, and who now had another victory within his grasp. But Stonefox did nothing. He just stood there like a mountain. His eyes shifted to his own dogs, then to the finish line, then back to Little Willie holding Searchlight. With the heel of his moccasin, Stonefox drew a line in the snow. Then he walked back over to his sled and pulled out his rifle. Down at the end of Main Street, the other racers began to appear. As they approached, Stonefox fired his rifle into the air. They all came to a stop. Stonefox spoke. Anyone crosses this line, I shoot. And there wasn't anybody who didn't believe him. Stonefox nodded to the boy. The town looked on in silence as Little Willie, carrying Searchlight, walked the last 10 feet across the finish line. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this book as much as I did. Look at my eyes are leaking. Oh! You guys have a great Sunday. I love you, miss you. Remember to be safe, be smart, and be kind.